Great. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us live today. My name is Shavi. I'm a product manager at LinkedIn and the host for today. Welcome to another product management learning series. And today with me, I'm very honored to have Ravi with us. Ravi is the co-founder and CEO of Scale Hire, a company that is reinventing the way how people learn and grow through coaching. A very interesting concept we will definitely talk more about towards the later half of the show. Ravi was also the chief product officer at Tinder, product director at Facebook, VP of product at TripAdvisor, and executive in residence at Reforge, where I first get to know how awesome Ravi is and all the amazing assets and knowledge that you have around product management. So thank you so much for joining us today, Ravi. We're honored to have you.
Thank you for inviting me, Shabi. I'm really excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation. I think a lot of great topics to dig into.
Awesome. Thank you. And for those who are joining us live today, please say hi, introduce yourself, where you're joining us from, and what you're hoping to learn from Ravi. This will be a pretty interactive session, so make sure you drop your questions in the chats. And I see a lot of folks joining from Iowa, Roberts, folks joining earlier. People pasted also introduced themselves. Sergi joining from Lesbian. This is part of LinkedIn Learning's product management learning series, a series of live streaming events where industry thought leaders and product practitioners share their PM career journey and lessons learned along the way to inspire aspiring and current PM like you to level up your product career. So make sure you subscribe to our newsletter to receive future event updates as well as recap of past events. Now, without further ado, let's get started. So Ravi, you have so many, amazing product experiences, especially in the consumer product space. But why don't we just travel back the memory lane and tell us a little bit about your journey to product management, how you get to where you are today?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been a lifelong product manager and product leader. It's been something that I discovered early and something that I've kept coming back to. It started when I was a kid. My dad brought home a computer. Back in those days, there wasn't much to do other than to learn how to program. So I learned to code. I started building games. And that really kicked off a lifelong love of building products. And so that was something I did throughout my childhood. And then in high school, I started a game company and started to release games commercially. I went to college in Boston and then actually dropped out of college for a little bit to pursue the game company full time. But I promised my parents I would go back to school and finish up my degree. And I did that. And when I graduated, I was looking at different opportunities. I thought, maybe I'll get, I did my degree in software engineering. I thought I would get a software engineering job and ended up at interviews at Microsoft. And the interviews were really interesting because they focused a lot more on specs and customers and requirements than on code. And I found out halfway through the day, the recruiter told me, I'm really sorry, we put you in the wrong interviews. We actually put you in product manager interviews, not in software engineering interviews. You can come back tomorrow and finish up engineering interviews, or you can finish up the day with product interviews. And I ended up finishing up the day with product interviews, getting an offer, not really knowing what product was at the time. And that just kicked off sort of throughout my life. I've been really interested in product. I've tried management consulting as well as a few other things, but keep coming back to it. And I spent about 6 years at Microsoft working on various parts of the gaming products, working on Xbox and Xbox Live. Then I went to business school. And after that, I've gone between smaller and larger companies. I met Brian Balfour, who's the CEO of Reforge, through Viximo, which is his first startup. I joined as one of the first 5 or so employees there. After that, I went to TripAdvisor, where I was a product leader and got a lot of my experience growing teams and really thinking about strategy at more of a broad company level. That I led a team on Gen Z engagement at Facebook, and then was the chief product officer at Tinder. And over the past couple of years, as an executive in residence at Reforge, and just through advising and coaching, I've spent a lot of time helping other product managers and product leaders think about their skills more critically and helping them level up.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for being with us today. And we also have a very, very international crowd. This is very exciting with Nikki from Singapore, Elena from Spain, a lot of people from India, from Nepal. Um, Very exciting. UEA, a lot of folks from the US as well. So thanks for joining us today. We're very excited to have you here with us. So Ravi, you have worked at some of the very amazing and interesting companies, especially around consumer products. What would you say were some of the biggest lessons that you learned throughout your journey being a product leader in the consumer product space? I think specifically what will be most interesting and helpful for our audience is for you to give us maybe one or two example of a product that you build that you're particularly proud of, how you formulate like the vision for the product and then kind of drive buy-in and champion that vision all the way through execution. I think Sergey also mentioned that he would love to learn about product strategy and how you drive impact via product innovation.
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson I've learned, which sounds obvious and it's easy to say but hard to do, is to focus relentlessly on the customer. And the reason I say that it's hard to do is when you're in a product role, there's so much happening every day, and the people that you're surrounded with are not the customers. The people that you're surrounded with are the people that you're building with, other people at the company, and so it's really easy to start to focus on what does the company need to achieve its goals? What do we need to do to hit our OKRs, to grow revenue, to grow acquisition? And as you start to focus on those metrics, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that underneath all of these metrics, there are individual customers with individual problems that they're trying to solve through your product, or maybe not through your product. And it's really important not to lose that sense of, at the ground level, what does the customer want? That's, of course, something that Amazon has done really well by putting customer obsession at the forefront. And I think if you look at companies over sort of a grand kind of time, where you look at, as they grow, and then when they start to go into decline, you'll often see that companies grow the best when they have that really tight connection to customers, and they start to wane when they lose that and start optimizing instead for themselves. And I think it's one of the reasons that startups disrupt big companies very routinely. It's because when you're a startup and you don't have any data, you have no choice but to focus on the customer. And there's so few of them that you have to talk to them to figure out what to do next. And that creates this really golden line of communication between you and the customer that the bigger companies might not have. Often at bigger companies, user research gets time consuming and expensive and doesn't happen very often. And so one of the biggest things that I encourage PMs to do is figure out how to talk to your customers in the lightest way possible. You can pick up the phone and talk to someone if you're in enterprise sales. One of the best examples is from TripAdvisor. There were a group of PMs that would hop on the Amtrak from Boston to New York, going up and down the aisles and talking to people about what their travel plans, asking them how they had booked their hotels, how they were booking restaurants. And it was just a great example of how user research doesn't need to be, heavy and difficult and time consuming. A single conversation with a customer can be really illuminating and can help color in all of the things that you're seeing through the data. And I think a good example of that, one I haven't talked about before, but I think is an interesting example from TripAdvisor, and it touches into both how to think about the customer as well as how to think about what the company is trying to accomplish, is TripAdvisor, when I was there, launched TripAdvisor Q&A. And the idea there was to make it easy for travelers to be able to ask questions about specific properties that were listed on the platform. And the insight that was driving that was that people were coming to the reviews. They were spending a lot of time reading reviews and searching reviews, trying to get an answer to a specific question that they might have, like, are the rooms handicap accessible? Is there a lot of noise from construction? Is this kid friendly? And so you could glean all of that information within the millions of reviews that are on TripAdvisor. But even better would be a way for people to ask questions, answer those questions, and have the questions answered by fellow travelers as well as by the property owners. In addition, it was a great way to expand TripAdvisor's SEO strategy. So it had some very clear lines from creating customer value to driving business value. But it was a really good example of how to look at a latent behavior that's already happening on the product, and turn that into a very successful feature that creates value for the customer, but also, as a result of creating value for the customer, drives value for the company.
Yeah, I really like the combo of how through talking to customer, looking at the insights, you're able to devise a feature that actually benefit both the customer but also the business. So the SEO side of the house through indexing the Q&As, helping to make customers' life easier without having to sift through all the reviews. So I love that example. When it comes to consumer product, I think a lot of times I get very overwhelmed by a lot of the new jargons that are coming up in the
Yep.
past couple of years, like Web3, metaverse, just to name a few. So, how do you think people who are interested in, let's say, breaking into consumer product from maybe the B2B space or other spaces, aspiring PM, what kind of trends in the consumer product space that you think we should be, keep up with in order to level up our product career in the consumer space?
I think it's a really interesting time right now in the consumer product space, as well as in a lot of aspects of the B2B space. I think one of the things that a few years ago companies like Slack hit on is that just because people work at a company doesn't mean that they're any less human. And by creating a product that they love, that's valuable to them, you can start to sell rather than top down. You can sell bottoms up. You can create product-led growth by focusing on that customer, and treating employees not as something different than users and consumers, but actually treating them like consumers and having the same level of focus on design and user experience, and some of the delightful value that you get in products like Slack. And so, if you're interested in moving into consumer, I think that there's a few trends right now. There's definitely some jargon like Web3 and metaverse. And for people that are interested in moving into consumer, I think that there is going to be right now, a lot of Web3, what's happening there, is kind of weighed down by how technically complex engaging with the Web3 ecosystem is. And so for really good consumer oriented thinkers that have great product sense, there's opportunities to think about how do we take that to the next level and make it much more consumable for the mass set of people that are going to start to adopt these technologies. And one of the trends I'm really excited about, which sort of combines Web3 and the metaverse, is the fact that years ago, people thought social was going to be winner take all, that there was going to be one or a couple of big companies like Facebook, and they were going to own the social graph. And as a result of owning that, those companies would really define what social experiences look like. But now I think we're seeing this massive proliferation in new types of social spaces. And so I think of the metaverse not so much in terms of just VR, but in the idea that actually, in all these different forms, you can create purpose-built social places that solve for a particular thing that a person's trying to accomplish with other people. And so, I think if we look at like the metaverse and we expand the definition, today there's media-based metaverses like Substack, there's 3D metaverses like, Fortnite and Roblox, there's AR metaverses, there's VR metaverses. But what those things all have in common is they're tapping into sort of three trends. One, there's new ways of navigating social spaces online. There's new ways of new interfaces into those social spaces, whether or not it's stories on Instagram or virtual reality on Oculus. And then with Web3 and the decentralized business models that they're creating, there's new incentives to engage in social spaces. And so I think that there's going to be a really interesting set of innovation around that that's going to enable proliferation of these better places to meet social needs that people have. In particular, I'm excited about decentralized features as a way to create interoperability between those spaces. Because so far, things like particular games or particular platforms have been walled gardens. The idea that you could own something and take it from context to context, I think, is really interesting.
That's awesome. I like purpose-built social space. I think that's going to be how I look at all the different trends and thinking about what was the problem they're trying to solve? What is the purpose why they exist? I think a lot of our audience are very, very interested actually in learning about your career trajectory, as well as how you define what is a peak PM, how to become one, and how to excel one. So I remember reading one of the most comprehensive product competencies tools that you define. That's the first time I think I get to know your work. You define the strongest PM as intellectual athletes who are able to excel at many different diverse and mutually enforcing set of skills. So this is one of the wills, competencies wills that I seen, that you define all the various skills that product manager should master. So can you talk a little bit about your thoughts behind defining, this will, and how could product ICs, might be able to leverage this as they are trying to navigate through their career. Let's start with people who wanted to become a PM, how they can leverage this will to map their path to become a product manager.
Yeah. So I think for people that are interested in getting into product, it could seem overwhelming at first. I think that was one of the things that as I put together this competency framework that I recognized both through the work that I'd done as well as just putting it on paper, is that the set of skills that people need are really broad. And there's nobody who excels at all of these. The reason there's a unicorn in the middle is because if you're great at all these competency skills, you're a mythical unicorn. And certainly some of those product folks exist, but most people have strengths in particular areas. I think for new PMs, the advantage that looking at things through this framework has is, one, you can get a sense from a 360-degree perspective of what is a product manager in the ideal sense. Some companies are more execution focused, and so product managers are doing more project management work. Some companies are more customer focused, and so different companies might emphasize different parts of this wheel, but this gives a really good baseline into what is the broad set of skills that a person needs to have in order to succeed at being a PM, which is important as you enter into the field to understand. And it's organized into 4 areas. So as a PM, you need to be great at product execution, which is working with teams to deliver great products. You need to be great at customer insight, which goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is you need to be able to understand that customer and translate that understanding into great product. You need to be great at product strategy, which is taking the individual features that you're building and understand how they create strategic advantage for your particular area of the product and for your company. And you need to be great at influencing people. I think product is a rare role where you are a leader from day one. You might not have direct reports, but you're leading stakeholders, you're managing up, and over time that leadership element just becomes more and more important. So that's the first thing, is I think it helps new PMs understand how the role is defined. And then I think the second thing, which is helpful for new PMs as well as current PMs, is to look at the competencies and just quickly rate yourself for each of the competencies. One of 3 levels. Do you feel like you are excelling in this area? Do you feel like you're on track in this area? Or do you feel like this is an area that needs focus? And that quick self-assessment can help PMs understand 2 things. One is, where do they really spike? Because ultimately, as a PM, you'll be successful not by being moderately good at all of these things, but being great at a few of them. And then the second thing is to understand, are there any gaps that are potentially holding you back? You may not be strong in a particular area, and that might be something that you want to invest in, but it might be something where you partner with other people on the team to fill in that gap that you have, and you work with a complementary set of people. So I think it's useful as a way to identify your strengths and then evaluate gaps and figure out, are those things that you want to grow, or are those things where you'll build a team around you or have a team around you to help you close those gaps.
Awesome. As you think about progressing your career from like a product IC, let's say, to a people manager of product managers, and then a product leader, what kind of skills should you anchoring more on? Like, how does that change in terms of what skills to master as you progress your product career?
Yeah, definitely. So I think about it in this way. So a product manager's primary job is to build a product. A product, sort of a senior manager or a team leader's job is to build the team that builds the product. A manager of PMs, their primary job is to build the team that build the product. And then an executive, a VP or a CPO. So as a manager of managers, your primary job is to build the system that builds the team that builds the product. And so as you get more senior as a product leader, it's important to start thinking about how you move the ball forward, not just in terms of the product, but also in terms of the people and the systems that you're building on your team. And that systems oriented thinking is part of the reason that, in some of the material that I've published about this competency framework, that the bottom area of competencies, the product strategy and the influencing people, become more critical as you become a product leader. So you could sort of think about this as a wheel that you're winding yourself around. All of these competencies are important at all levels, but the relative emphasis changes. Early PMs are really focused on product execution and customer insight. More senior product leaders are more focused on product strategy and influencing people. And the really key thing about succeeding in those areas is to understand product strategy really well and make good decisions that the market is going to value. And then to create systems that allow you to scale the culture, the processes of the product team, including hiring and goal setting and strategy setting, so that you as a product leader can get more leverage from your time spent. If you spend your time micromanaging and trying to fix every problem yourself, you're quickly going to run out of time. But if instead you spend your time building systems that then run really efficiently, you'll be able to get much better leverage on that time.
I love building systems to build leverage. One of the core themes that you mentioned throughout is the ability to influence. At the beginning, you might not have any authority, when you were a product IC, working with engineers, design, and all the various business functions. And as you grow into a leadership role, you might have slightly more authority. But what were some of the best practices that you have developed, or systems, if you will, if it applies here, when it comes to influencing without authority?
Yeah, it's a great question that Pranav is asking. I think the first thing is to reframe, is to say, I think a lot of times when people think about influencing without authority, they think there's some future state where they're going to have authority and they can use a different set of skills. But there's never really a case where, you can basically where authority takes over. Even CEOs need to really influence their executives, need to influence their teams. We're lucky to be in an industry and at a time where people are in demand. And so people can always go to another role if they're not convinced of the team strategy or they don't find the culture to fit really with them. So, right from when you're an APM to when you're a CEO, your primary mode of getting things done is going to be influence rather than authority. So knowing that, it's really important to think about two things. One is, how do I give people the context to understand the direction that we're heading, so that they can understand not just what you feel needs to be done, but how did you get to that answer? Because ultimately, anytime you're influencing someone in a particular area of work, they're going to be making a lot of decisions in that area of work that you're not going to have visibility into. This is really true of engineers, for example. I like to tell PMs that engineers are always going to write the final draft of your spec. So make sure that they have the context to do it well. And then the second thing is to really understand their motivation, and to make sure that you're understanding that motivation and you're speaking to it. If you can give people really good context and you can understand what motivates them, then, when you influence them, that you've kind of set, you help them understand what the direction is so that they can move confidently in that direction. And if you motivate them, that they'll be incentivized and excited to move in that direction.
Context and motivation.
Yeah,
I think we can
absolutely
apply that to any conversation that we want to help others and, influencing the result. I think your points around building system had really also resonate with our audience. I think the next question I'd like to ask you is that there are some trends going on in the product management space that I got this question actually a lot, whether you should specialize in a particular, PM domain, such as tech PM or enterprise SaaS PM or consumer PM, or be, a generalist, or joining certain other emerging product functions, such as product ops. What is your advice, when it comes to individual career growth in terms of specializing or being a generalist PM?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll actually dovetail on something Philip Michael said in the comments. He said he wants to evolve into a T-shaped product manager. And I think this idea of being T-shaped is really important, because as a product manager, you do need to be a generalist. You're going to be doing new things. You're going to have different challenges from day to day, month to month, year to year. And so it's important to be this intellectual athlete that can do a lot of things well. But infinite optionality can be overwhelming, and if you focus too much on that, you end up being good at a lot of things, but not great at a few things. And so the idea with the T-shape is that from a skills perspective, people should have a broad set of things that they are good at, but then they should have a couple of things that they really spike at. And so then you get that T-shape where you combine breadth in a number of areas with depth in a couple of areas where you have a unique advantage. And so I think that's really important for PMs to think about from a career perspective, is where do you want to preserve optionality, because you get excited about a lot of different things and you want to work on a lot of different things, and where do you want to specialize and really invest in something where you're uniquely great. And the choice of where you want to specialize, I think, is really up to you. Certain people specialize at a particular stage. People specialize at a particular type of product work. They might like new product development. They might like growth work. They might like platform work. Some people specialize in a particular domain, like fintech or consumer social or others. And so that's something that I would encourage people to ask themselves, is what does that T-shape look like? Where am I going to specialize? And how do I want to manage my career so that I preserve optionality in the areas I'm really excited about and specialize in the areas where I can make a uniquely great impact?
I love that. Would you say people should explore more early in their career to develop that sense before they specialize into the T shape, the eye of the T?
I think that's great to do. So, a lot of people ask me, should I go to a bigger company or a smaller company? One of the advantages of bigger companies is, especially early in your career, you have an opportunity to go to a lot of different product teams. When I was at TripAdvisor, we created a product management rotational program where we had new hires come in and do 4 6-month rotations in different product areas where they got experience on B2B, B2C, on mobile, on new product development, on growth work. And that was a really nice way for a person to get an idea of all the different types of product work and figure out where they excel and what really excites them. So, whether it's a formal program like that, or it's thinking about how to manage your career in a way that you get those opportunities, or it's a side hustle, doing things to get exposure to different areas in you're probably not ample spare time. I think it's a great way to do some career experiments and understand where you want to specialize.
Awesome.
And a key
So,
thing
Ravi,
I'd say
yeah,
that about that as well, it's a very personal thing. I think a lot of people say, "Oh, I want to I want to be on the consumer side and I want to do new product development because that's really cool and that's where a lot of like the attention and the media is." But if that's not something that you're personally really excited about, and you're really, I worked with a PM at Tinder who just was really passionate about trust and safety and content moderation, and she was amazing at that. And so she's got a specialty now, which is incredibly valuable, and she can go, pretty much anywhere she wants with that specialty. And so it's important to figure out, not just what you think the market wants, but what really drives you and where you excel.
awesome. So, Ravi, as we introduced earlier, before, you are the co-founder of Scale Hire, a company that helps people to learn and grow through coaching. Tell us a little bit more about why did you start the company? What's your vision for the company? And I think we have a lot of aspiring PMs with varying degree of experience. Can they benefit from your program?
Yeah,
Tell us more
definitely.
about it.
So we started the company. I started with Victoria Young, who's my co-founder. We're currently 3 employees. Our third employee is Michelle Kwok, who joined us a few months ago from On Deck. So we're really early. We started the company after having conversations with a lot of people. I was doing coaching. Victoria was doing coaching. And what we were hearing was that, especially post-pandemic, people are feeling like there's more ways than ever to learn new skills. There's podcasts and blogs and cohort-based courses. But they were having trouble figuring out, like, how do I put those ideas specifically into practice in my role? And how do I, based on those learnings, get to where I want to go from a career standpoint? And I knew from my own experience that coaching can be incredibly valuable for that. A lot of executives talk about their coach as their secret superpower. And it's really valuable to have a sounding board, have someone who can give you candid guidance and help you reframe your thinking. But it's also very expensive. And so far, it's not been accessible to a large number of people. So we knew that there was a really interesting problem space in providing more one-on-one support for folks. But we didn't know, is there an interesting way to scale this? And so we started to look at what was happening in other domains, like in the healthcare space with companies like, or in the therapy space with companies like Talkspace and BetterHelp, in the fitness space with companies like Future and Peloton, in the meditation space with companies like Headspace and Calm, and in the nutrition space with companies like Noom. All of these companies are doing an amazing job of productizing what used to be a one-on-one relationship between a person and a provider. And in that process, making those relationships more accessible. And so we said, there's a really interesting, big, valuable problem space here. There's a really interesting solution space here. Let's put them together. And so about a year ago, we started the company with this big mission of thinking about how do we democratize access to professional coaching to help people level up. And we went into like really rapid, really lightweight product discovery. We used a lot of no-code tools during that. We tested out a couple of different ways of doing that. And what we arrived at that's been working really well for folks is this idea of a guided sprint. And so a guided sprint is essentially a structured coaching program that you go through one-on-one with another coach. In some ways, you can think about it as a cohort-based course, but where you're the only one in the cohort. And so we've developed guided sprints around particular things that people in the middle of their careers could benefit from. We have one on leveling up as a PM, another one on managing a high-performance team, another one on productivity. And we're building a platform so that we can expand the library of guided sprints. And we're building the network of coaches so that we can expand the set of folks that are there to guide people through that content. So we're creating a very outcome-driven way to take a particular challenge that you might have and tackle that challenge with the help of a one-on-one coach.
That's awesome. I think what's most exciting for me is seeing how you can platformize that, because coaching is such a service business.
Yeah.
How do you productize that to make it scale such that more people can benefit from your service and all the excellent coaches on your platform? I think we're almost at time, and your session has been super, super helpful. We have a lot of your fans. Each statement made by Ravi was impactful to the core. So Kavya was a huge fan of you. Michael, so much valuable information here. Garrison, you rock. Ravi, appreciate you spending time with
thank you,
us.
everyone.
So how can we stay in touch with your work? What's the best way to follow your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I post a lot on LinkedIn, so you can follow me here on LinkedIn. You can also go to my website. It's just ravi-mehta.com. And if people have questions, feel free to reach out. I can answer them or post them. So a lot of what we're trying to do is help people level up. So happy to be with people today and to help people do that.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ravi, for your time and for being here with us today, sharing so much of your wisdom and knowledge. And folks, we every Friday tune in to listen to more product leaders such as Ravi and many others with us every Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Thank you so much and have a nice weekend.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone.